But I want to offer you one final example that isn't a big success, one that you're probably unfamiliar with. Failures can be instructive too, and in this case, it's not so much a failure as a success on such a personal scale that it doesn't register in public life. So in Brockton, at 168 Dover Street, is the house in which Rocky Marciano grew up. In the mid-1950s, Marciano was heavyweight boxing champion of the world, and the only one to retire undefeated. Which you hang around in bars in Brockton, somebody will tell you sooner or later, right? In his time, and still today, he symbolized the virtues of industrial Brockton: hard work, competence with the hands, immigrant striving, and a willingness to endure hardship in order to provide for his family and bring honor to his people, however you construct his people. Marciano's father worked all his life, all his adult life in the shoe factories, but Brockton was already decades into its industrial decline when Rocky rose to glory. Rocky died in 1969, and he's in many ways old news, but he still figures in the city's cult mythology and its history. The high school teams are called the Boxers. They used to be called the Shoemakers. One of Brockton's municipal epithets is City of Champions, and so on. The question of what to do with Marciano has gotten tangled up with the question of what to do with the city's industrial past, which is at once a distinctive identity and a burden. Brockton is still known as a place of hard work, but it has also been known for more than a generation as a tough town in all the wrong ways, a depressed place that's in the news only when somebody gets killed or a pit bull mauls a child. Right? That's beginning to change in part because Brockton High School is getting national attention as an example of a big public school that turned itself around. But Brockton is still too often reduced to a cliche, a blue-collar city lacking in blue-collar work, a city that's seen better days. So about a decade back, a coalition of Brockton's public officials and private players brought in a noted landscape artist, Patricia Johansson, who's done parks and other projects all over the world, to give the city a makeover. The idea was to change Brockton's image by greening the river and sprucing up streets and adding to and rationalizing the network of attractions. I will not give you the blow-by-blow, but suffice to say that it really, really didn't work out. Right? So Johansson gave it her best shot, but she didn't have enough local support lined up, and the mayor and business leaders didn't get behind what she wanted to do, and nothing happened. Part of the problem is that she wanted to center her plan on a Rocky Marciano trail that would follow the path of the champion's runs through the city. Some people in town thought that harping on Rocky just perpetuated Brockton's image as a place of atavistic violence, and some people thought the artist from out of town was profaning the champion's sacred memory by turning him into some kind of tree hugger, and some people just didn't care about it, right? So the Marciano angle just mostly alienated people. Johansson nevertheless used her own money to buy the semi-abandoned Marciano house on Dover Street, intending to restore it to its 1950s condition and turn it into a museum that would be one stop on the trail. But in the end, when the project tanked, she had to sell the house at a loss. Enter Mark Kaziri, a janitor at the post office. He's a lifelong Brocktonian and a passionate worshiper in the cult of Marciano, seeing in Rocky an exemplar of everything good about his hometown, which he sums up with perfect Italian-American pitch in the following phrase: hard work, good food, and respect. Yeah. So Kaziri, who's about my age, a couple years older, saw Marciano's world as his own parents' world, which he saw disappearing around him, and he wanted to recover it and preserve it, an impulse that you can understand. Right? So Kaziri wanted the house so badly that he broke in and started restoring it on the sly while attempting to put together a mortgage. Right? After many travails, he finally bought the house and set about restoring it single-handed, right? Guided by old Marciano family pictures and reminiscences. His mission was to return it to exactly what it had been in the 1950s, a typical home for a working-class family of the period, picking through trash heaps and junkyards for the right vintage doorknobs and lintels and appliances. He was peeling back post-industrial Brockton to get at the persistent layer of industrial Brockton and incarnate it in the house, an airlock into another time. And that's exactly where it stands now. Kaziri lives in the house. There's no Rocky Marciano trail, and there's no museum. There's no public iteration of all that effort, all that creative inspiration. There's just one man who's good with his hands, pushing 50, living with his pit bulls and his parrots in his own private, partially restored vision of the 1950s. the story attests to the depth of longing for that lost world of industrial urbanism and to the strength of the creative impulse, which in this case was poured into a set of containers provided by styles associated with the 50s. Styles of interior decoration, styles of work, of fighting, of carrying oneself in the world. But the institutional purchase of all this effort was minimal, right? Lots of style, not enough institution, right? There was no hook for the resale, no arrangement to screen the creative act of recovery and display from the bottom line. And in the end, there was insufficient capital and political leverage to turn the private vision into an intervention in public life. Mark Kaziri, who's almost as stubborn as Rocky Marciano was, made no compromises, not that any acceptable compromises were offered to him. He overcame problems with permits and loans, threatening phone calls, and complaints that he was after the fortune rumored to be buried in the backyard or the basement. He's as achingly engaged as anyone here with the aesthetic and historical pleasures of a place and time. But without an accommodation to the market or the political order, without arranging some kind of screen between his creative acts and the bottom line, that passionate engagement was only just enough to turn the vision of the Marciano house that he shared with Patricia Johansson into a tangible artifact for his own benefit. He couldn't turn the house into a tangible public artifact. I end with his story as a reminder to us all, myself included, as a writer who chooses to work in genres that don't always pay the bills, of the compromises necessarily entailed in setting up a hook for the resale. Crafting such compromises, trying to winnow out the most distasteful and choose the most advantageous, is one way to protect a creative impulse as it makes its way into tangible being amid the flows of people and money and power and ideas that remake cities and cultures. Thanks for listening.